Hello and welcome to Turn Off, Turn On Ventures. My name is Jia Hong and I am the pedaling investor. It's really a surreal experience today because I'm here with Ahmed from Enviroo, which is the first investment I made when I decided to be an angel investor focused on the climate. Ahmed, thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for meeting. It's great to meet in person finally
Yeah.
after lots of Zoom calls, and it's
Yeah.
also we're very honoured that we were your first investment.
Yeah, it was quite the education, honestly, when I was first looking at Enviroo, and that was a bit more than a year now.
Yes.
Maybe we start with a quick introduction on who Enviroo.
Yeah, absolutely. So Enviroo is predominantly a PET plastics recycling facility. PET stands for polyethylene terephthalate, and that is the material that predominantly handles food and drink. And the reason why I focused on this material is it's the biggest pollutant in the world, and it's a material that comes into everybody's existence, whether you are royalty or whether you are blue collar worker or white collar. It doesn't matter who you are in society, somebody will come into contact with PET on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And working with a material for me that A, impacts everybody's life, but B, can, if the relationship with that material changes, can make massive climate change differences, was really why I focused on that. Historically, my background evolved a lot around IT, technology recycling, mobile phone recycling, and it was just such a schizophrenic industry to keep up with the constant changes. I mean, you've seen how our phones have evolved, and it's how do you actually create sustainable solutions? And it was those kind of real painful experiences of not being able to recycle something. For example, we got called into an architect's firm and they said, we've got this huge CAD printer to recycle, and we were like, how do we actually recycle? But we were meant to be an IT recycling business, so we had to work out a solution. It wasn't the most cost-effective solution, it probably wasn't the most environmental impactful solution, but these are the challenges, and that's where I guess the concept of Enviroo evolved, was looking at a recycling project that is sustainable for the long term, and B, a material that hasn't seen much change, and depending on your point of view, is not going to change for the next 15 to 20 years. Changing a primary material will have a massive cost impact, and it will impact, and that across the value chain will have hemorrhaging impacts if the cost of PET changes, or it gets replaced by, we're hoping, with other materials, but we're so far away from that. So we've really got to kind of accept that, look, PET is part of our life. It's a problem, but if we change our attitude and our behaviour, we can recycle it and we can make a difference. And up until new technologies come in to replace it.
I mean, when I first looked into Enviroo, my mentality really was that, hey, I'm trying to be an angel investor and trying to find the most frontier technologies, right? And obviously, PET is one of those things that preferably is no longer part of our lives. But as you said, it's so far away and it's so commonplace in our day-to-day lives. Like, so I honestly believe that even myself, I don't even know how much PET is part of my life, right? And that's why when I saw the proposal, I thought, well, there's going to be a clear supply of recyclable PET waste, and there's not enough plants available.
Absolutely not.
Could you speak a bit more about like the actual demand and supply matching?
Absolutely. So look, if we're talking about the UK in particular, some of the recent figures have stated, some of the larger waste operators have come out with reports saying that the UK would need at least another 43 or 44 PET recycling plants alone just to meet the demand. We're a country of 60 million people plus. We're a developed nation, and also what we have now, which is a massive game changer for founders like myself, is that you have the plastics packaging tax. So it's now become a legislative mandatory requirement for recycled content to be used in manufacturing. And I think that's really changed the demand profile, because historically what you had is your powerhouse brands, your Coca-Cola, your PepsiCo, etc., saying we want to use 100% recycled material, we want to get to 100% by 2030. But now what you have is brands where you have no association with, your supermarket water, your lemonade, your other brands that you just don't have that connection with, are all now having to use 30% recycled content. So for us, it really has just proven that the demand is completely outstripping supply.
Yeah.
But it's not just powerhouse brands that are doing it. Every manufacturer involving plastic and PET plastic now has to use it, whether you know the brand or not.
Yeah.
And that really is solidifying our growth plan, enabling us to create a platform business to actually respond to the market needs, but also responding to a point where we're making a sensible contribution, and the market is still very far away from being saturated.
And what is the current supply before Enviroo's
So
bans?
the current supply, I mean, if we look at some of our competitors, I think there's probably, in terms of what we're making as a food grade polymer, and you sell that on a tonnage basis, I think there's probably about 150 to 200,000 tons available on the marketplace. I think the demand is over 500,000 tons per annum, and that's being now currently being substituted by international supply. So materials coming in from different parties, but then that also causes a problem for the brands, because you've got your carbon impact of the footprint of bringing, say, material from Romania or Poland for UK manufacturing. So these are again challenges impacting demand, and we've also got Brexit.
Yeah.
So we've got that as an issue in itself, which is further solidifying the absolute importance of having a UK recycling infrastructure. And that's really why we're at an opportune time to really make sure we can maximise the market opportunity, but also have a product for UK brands in the UK, homegrown, rather than relying on imports.
And this, you mentioned this whole, there needs to be about 44 plants. How many are there today?
So currently there's about 6 doing what we do in terms of food grade polymer. There are other recyclers that do food grade flake, which is the pre-product before it makes the polymer, and our polymer is what goes into making the pre-mold, which is then blown into the bottle. So there are probably around 6 companies that potentially do what we do, and but some of them are part of a more generalistic waste enterprise, whereas we're much more of a specialist focused on PET, and we're working to provide a specification for the some of the most prominent brands, which include Lucozade, Ribena, as well as brands such as Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. So by meeting their standard, we've got a quality benchmark, which means that we can sell our product across the range, and both locally and internationally. And maybe one day we'll start exporting some of our material and changing that market dynamic where we're currently importing.
Yeah, wow. Just on the climate impact side of things, how would you describe? Is there a comparison between, let's say, once Enviroo plants are up and running, the comparative carbon impact for local supply versus imported supply?
So, I mean, there's so many different ways you can do calculations on this. I think the most simplistic way is what is the carbon impact of offsetting this material not going to landfill. So should a plastic bottle hit landfill? I mean, there's different studies that one say 1 ton emits 1 ton of carbon emissions. Other studies have said, they can emit up to 3 times carbon emissions. So I think the key thing to look at here is that by recycling, we're offsetting what would go to landfill, what would go to into oceans, and this is much more of a preventative program around climate change, that we're stopping the emissions taking place in the first place by recycling. We're stopping the contribution of creation of microplastics, because especially PET, they say PET can take anywhere between 450 to 700 years to disintegrate. hits water, it's gone within a year, which is why there's so much ocean dumping, because you can get rid of it, but then you have the microplastic issue getting into the fish, into our what we consume, and your internal environment is just as important as the external, and you're still impacted. So no matter what, you've got to stop plastic hitting either landfill or the oceans. And what we've got is a solution where we can take that material, and ultimately, what we're giving consumers is a reassurance that it's being recycled. We're doing bottle-to-bottle recycling. We're focusing on one area where we can show and prove a change. I can say to you, Gia, your Coke bottle has been recycled into this bottle with this manufacturer, and giving you that granularity of that process, that we are a zero emissions facility, that we're using proven technology, and we have minimal noise emissions as well. So climate is not just about environmental greenhouse gases. There's a whole plethora of activities that make up that contribute to the climate emergency, and I believe what we've got is a long-term sustainable solution to ultimately. For me, climate change has come from an element of despondency from people, that they think, well, what's the point of doing anything anymore, because it's just going to happen anyway. The problem's going to be there. Even if I recycle, it's never going to be. So people have lost hope. And what we're trying to do is, outside of, as a founder, it's not just about providing a practical solution, but it's changing behaviour. And by making people believe that recycling is important, that they should recycle because they know it's going to be recycled, that's going to change behaviour. And if we can link social impact into that, where, and I'll come on to deposit return scheme shortly, where they can see a meaningful contribution, that behavioural change will ultimately contribute to materials being segregated at home, people taking their responsibility at home, and then that filtering through the actual waste process. So it's really quite important to, when looking at climate change and saying, well, how much of this is an attitude and perspective versus solutions, because people can have all the solutions and you can have that, but if you're not going to recycle properly, what's the point of having the plant if the wrong material is going to reach it? So it's that real balance between technology and behavioural change, and I think we're with how we're looking at this, I think we're onto a winner here.
Tell me more about the deposit return scheme.
So deposit return scheme. So in Europe, you have a take back program where you will take your bottles back to a supermarket, a bottle bank, and you'll get cash rebate, which you can either then, which is formed part of the taxation. So your £1 bottle is now £1.20, and you get your 20 pence back. We don't have that program in England. We have we have that going live in Scotland in the next 18 months. But what we're looking at is really dealing with on the go recycling patterns and behaviours, because people do recycle at home, but each local council has their own different recycling system. So my parents have 4 recycling bins where they live in the north. I don't even have a recycling bin. My council gives me a bag. So completely different. So whilst I can try to recycle at home, there's a limit to what I can do in terms of the segregation, because I have to put my plastic and my cardboard in the same bag, whereas my parents have a plastics bin, cardboard bin, and organics. So the deposit return scheme, there's lots of studies that have said, in London alone, there's 700 to 1 million bottles littered on a daily basis, which is crazy. On a daily basis. And this was pre-pandemic. Obviously, we've got to look at how life has changed over the past 3 years. But what we're trying to do is look at the fact that society has changed. For me, when I was growing up, Monday to Friday was work. The weekend was off. We'd go to the supermarket on the Saturday with my parents. Sunday was you stayed at home and you had time with the family. Today, people are on the go 24/7. Supermarkets are open all the time. Sunday's a working day for most people. You don't have that change. You don't have that breakdown in everything's on the go 24/7. So therefore, we have to accept that our consumer patterns and our consumption is also going to be 24/7. So having a program where if you are on the street, Gia, and you have an app and it says, okay, your local the nearest point to recycle your Pepsi bottle is at Oxford Circus tube station. It'll ping you and it'll tell you, so you can then recycle your bottle there and then. Ultimately, the vision is to be able to create that program, the app, where people can recycle very easily on the go to get rid of littering. But also, I'm really passionate about social impact in that I want to work with a charity or a issue that resonates with everybody. And I don't see why homelessness should be an issue in this, especially in a developed country like this. So if we can motivate the homeless people to collect the bottles, get them to recycle those at the machines, and that the cash goes to their hostel where they stay the night, ultimately that gets them stopping from begging. I don't feel guilty because I don't carry cash anymore. I just have my cards, so I don't feel bad for not donating. But ultimately, as a founder and CEO, I can then say, look, we've concentrated on this geographical region. There's 6 homeless people here. They've all been collecting. Let's sponsor some mental rehabilitation training. Let's get some therapy, and let's offer them work in our facilities. Get them off the streets. You as a consumer can say, you know what? I recycled 15 bottles. That generated £1.50. That gave John, who is homeless in this region, 2 coffees, a sandwich, and some crisps. And I've done something, and I've made a tangible difference. And again, it ultimately goes back to that concept of despondency and not trusting. And by having a deposit return scheme, enables consumers to see exactly how many bottles they've recycled, what their carbon offset is for that bottle. At the end of the year, you can say, actually on my app, I recycled 400 bottles, I gave £35 to charity, I offset 3 kilograms of carbon CO2 emissions, and this is what I've done personally. And I can see that, see that change. And when you can see that and it's bespoke to you, then I think that's where it's that ground root up solution. Whereas, look, you have fantastic initiatives through the United Nations and various things, but a lot of them are blue sky, or they're not relevant to a specific person. You've got to be a sustainability expert or in the industry or the region or to understand that. But not everybody is doing that. And for me, recycling and climate is something that we all contribute to. And if we can make it as simple as possible for someone to say, yeah, I'm joining this crusade and I can make a difference. And just by doing these simple things, I think that's where like you've got microplastic, if we've got micro behavioural change, that will ultimately lead to a much bigger macro solution for us all. And the key thing in all of that is that transparency, that you know exactly what's happening. And that's how, as a founder, I want to operate my business. This is transparent in what we're doing. This is how we're going to get all our stakeholders involved. And this is how we'll collaborate to bring all the different stakeholders for a united mission. And if it's not a win-win, there's no point being in business or in any aspect or any relationship. And that's I guess the core DNA of Enviroo and how we operate as a business.
That's one of those things whereby, while the core business is the recycling plant and the process of recycling, there's also that front end point of contact with the consumers, the users of those bottles, and through that connectivity, knowing that if I'm contributing through this deposit return scheme, through Enviroo's platform, and also knowing that these are the same people who are going to turn my bottles into pellets and pellets into 30% of a new bottle. I'm part of this journey.
Absolutely.
And I really like that, because I feel that sometimes the factory side, industrial side of things, it happens in not behind closed curtains, but it's just not that obvious to the front end consumer.
No, it's not. And the thing is, look, these we're building an industrial site where unless you specifically knew it, you would never know it existed. And it's not like you just would drive by and say, oh, there's a recycling factory, let me pop in and see what's happening. Again, you have health and safety and a number of permits and various things that we've got to abide by. So we can't just keep it. We've designed the facility in a way that we have a viewing platform, and what we want is someone to be able to come onto our facility, and there's a platform between the clean laboratory side of our facility and I guess the wash side, and there's a big kind of glass window so you can see the whole process. And part of what we're doing, we're working with the charity For Forwards, which is about education for children, and showing them that there's other careers outside of medicine, law, engineering, etc., and their sustainability and recycling industries do have meaningful careers for people. But it's, as you said, it's showing that industrial side to everybody and say, look, you can come see what we're doing. And that's part of what we've done, because people that have insight into that, and if they don't have the opportunity to come to a facility, they have the app and they're contributing, and they know that that is all linked. So because we've got whilst PT isn't changing, people's behaviour and consumers and habits are changing. We don't have a nuclear family anymore. These certain traditional structures don't exist. So we've got to adapt to that, and we've got to adapt to how people are behaving and how people are operating. And the only way we can, I think, we get through to people's head is by a very clear message, and to show them that this is what you're doing. I mean, in the same kind of comparison to Instagram, etc., you follow people who've got lots of followers. You take them a bit more seriously. It's all about, it's a numbers game. People, I'm following this person, or I've seen this many views of this video, and things go viral. It is a numbers game, and I guess what we want to do is go viral with changing people's behaviour. But it has to start at a micro level, and we don't want to be here, with blue sky statements that fall flat on their face, because that reputationally is just, we don't want this to be a short-term trend. This is not a TikTok video that will go expire in 2 months and then the next trend. This is something that needs to be part of your day to day. It's an embedded behavioural change, and that's ultimately where we this front end is important to make sure that the industrial side they marry and they interlock nicely.
On the industrial side, I think we spoke a bit already on this, that the way I see it is that after a year of doing investments and exploring this climate field, especially at the very early stage startups, I didn't know the gem I had when I spoke to you as the first company, because so many of these new startups, they are about new innovations, about new ideas that come out from the universities, and they're great ideas, and they have such potential for large impact. But in the end, for large impact, you need execution at scale.
Absolutely.
And for many of the startups that I speak to in the hardware space, it eventually ends up having a manufacturing line or production line, or for like yourself, a recycling plant, right? Building a factory. This is, how does someone get to a point whereby they can say, well, I know how to build a factory?
I mean, it takes it's a long complicated journey, and
because you've done this before.
I've done this before, and it's from trial and error, in terms of, I think the only way you can do this is by making mistakes. Otherwise, you will know and learning from others' mistakes. And I think that's the key thing is, I think ultimately when you're looking at innovation and you're looking at how you deploy, you've got to have you've got to think like an investor and say, look, will I lose my money on this? So in the same way how you've assessed an opportunity, I have that same mindset with my own business. Say, look, where are the key risks? How do we mitigate risk? And for me, the only way to kind of get something off the ground is risk mitigation. And that is for a lot of people a very boring process, because whilst I talked to you about really exciting things about innovation and behavioural change and stakeholder engagement, you don't see the side where I'm negotiating performance bonds and liquidated damages and insurances and technical designs that meet certain specification, and then also going back to our end customers and kind of also reverse engineering a process, because ultimately they're the end user, and then kind of trying to get the technology providers to make sure that they meet those requirements. But in the interim, if they're going to, and having all of the operational risks mitigated in that whole process. So you're constantly, it's a 360 assessment that just never stops. And I think that's where I think founders fail because they think, I've spotted a gap in the marketplace. I've got a USP. I've got legislative support. No, you've got to have all of that
To start.
But to actually implement, you know, and most importantly, I think founders need to accept where their limitations. You know, I have a team, and that team is massively important to the success. And you know, part of my role is, you know, I have technical expertise, but I'm not technical. I wouldn't classify myself as a techie. I'm much more of a commercial CEO and founder, and you know, I can create market opportunities and spot market opportunities and bring the right people together to deliver. But I've also got the foresight to say, look, I need a technical support. I need this, which is why I have a chief technology officer, I have a chief operations officer, because these guys bring in that supportive experience as well. So collaboratively, we cover everything. And I think sometimes where perhaps founders go wrong is the ego, in that they have to be seen that they know everything and people buy into them. But I think people buy into founders also have a humility to say, I've got a team to support this because my skill sets are here. I'll be driving this, and this, but the areas that I can't cover are covered by X, Y, Z. Otherwise, no one's Superman. And having that humility to say, look, you know, these are the gaps in the team, or this is where we are. I think that gives investors like yourselves comfort that, you know what, this is real. This opportunity is real. This project is real. If there's no challenges on the journey, then it's not real. You know, any successful marriage, relationship will have its hurdles. You know, you see a happy couple on their wedding day, but you know, everything is perfect. But the journey to get to that point, whether it's stresses of a guest list or you know, other things, there's challenges, processes. Ultimately, the key thing is that the founder has that vision. And I encourage other founders to don't lose sight of the vision, because that's what drives everything forward. But if you've got gaps, hire people or admit that, look, these are some of the gaps. And you know, I've got, you know, some of my other shareholders are involved in the business on a daily basis. You know, my own COO, my operations director Beth, you know, she's a founding shareholder like yourself. So it becomes a team. You know, and I think a lot of founders feel that they have to be on this journey on their own, and it's, you know, it's me, and it's like, no, there's no I in team, it's us. You've got to lead, absolutely, and you've got to be able to take responsibility for mistakes. You've got to be able to own up to anything, and you've got to motivate your team, and ultimately it is down to the founder. People do buy into that individual, but the right team can make or break a founder. And I really encourage founders, especially, you know, entrepreneurs who are going out solo, is to have a team or co-founder. I mean, I'm not a co-founder type of person. That doesn't suit my personality. But you know, but I think, you know, founders should really look at their skill sets.
Having a strong founding team that complements. No one can do everything.
Exactly.
Right?
No one has all the skill sets. And if they have, look, maybe you should be a management consultant. You know? You know, so.
I mean, when it comes specifically to building, I mean, right now there's so many product teams out there, right? There's so many software startups churning every day. Well, at least for myself, there's just that kind of pool of people trying to build a plant. And you mentioned right at the start that it's an iterative process. It's trial and error, to save some of the people that I've met along the way, some time and mistakes. But what would you say is one or two of the most common errors made when it comes specifically to building like a physical plant?
I think the common errors, one is size of kind of the building and space. I think a lot of people underestimate how big these machines are, and they don't go through a kind of 3D modeling visualization process, and that causes them problems. So some of our competitors, I don't know if you know the game Mousetrap. It's a board game, but it just looks really convoluted, and it's like a roller coaster, and it just looks really messy, like it's compacted into one small space. That's where people have gone wrong. Is that they've underestimated how big this wash line process is and the space you need around it, storage and everything else. Our building is massive, and we've got a huge height between the highest point of the extruder to the roof. All of these things have been designed with insurance and all these things in mind. I think a lot of people kind of go along and say, okay, well, this could fit. We'll deal with that later. Whereas we've gone the opposite and almost kind of modelled it to perfection, and then stress test that with insurance providers, with funders, with independent technical consultants, etc., to say, does this all work? Have we got enough space, etc.? I think that's one of the biggest things. And I think the second thing is, I think where people have gotten wrong is not fully understanding and listening to the brands. Because when we were talking to the brands, they suggested a couple of key technologies, which we kind of were like, maybe. We were kind of umming and ahhing. We didn't have as much exposure to that technology. But and they were like, look, this is kind of a prerequisite. We really want you to do this. This is our experience. And we took a leap of faith and said, okay, we'll have that. We'll incorporate that technology. Our competitors who didn't incorporate that technology don't have the product specification and quality because they missed out some key technologies in the kind of wash line process. So I think they're the two things mainly. Is one is understanding and seeing the value that the brands can bring and not having an ego to their experience and knowledge.
Brands meaning the buyers.
The buyers, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, etc. Because they've got technical teams. They're ultimately producing a product to a specific specification, which will have cataclysmic impacts if they don't meet that, and bottle goes out with contamination. So they spend a lot of time in R&D on that. So I think people need to listen to their customer a lot more and say, okay, these are things that you need. But secondly is when you're designing this, to make sure you have enough space. Because people don't.
You can't walk back on physical space, right?
You can't, exactly. We have silos and additional storage requirements and a wastewater treatment facility, and then also, for example, we have a huge cylinder holding water just for fire. That was an insurance requirement, which we hadn't really thought about. But luckily we have enough space and to have all of that. It would be worse if we ignored that, and then later down the line we didn't have that and we had a fire. Project and there's been lots of fires in this highly flammable material. So I think they're the two biggest takeaways: is really understand your operations and the size, and your bigger operation and trucks and lorry movements and everything around that facility, even down to where people are walking. And we've looked at how that all works. And secondly, so size is one thing, and secondly is listening to the brands and seeing what they have to say.
And from what I'm hearing, there's also sort of like 2B or the third thing, which is always anticipate for extras. Like they always have that buffer.
Exactly.
Right, because what is a space buffer? But obviously now when I'm hearing it, requirements change.
Requirements
you speak to insurers.
Yeah.
You need a water tank. Exactly. You speak to the brands. They want a certain product specification, which means some additional equipment, which means additional space.
Exactly.
And these buffers are both money buffers, space buffers, runway buffers, because now you need to procure something new. Exactly. You don't really, what you envisioned at the start, raise more than what you imagined at the start, because all the pluses and minuses that come with the expectations of others kind of change that financial model and time scale as well, right?
Definitely.
That's really helpful insight that you have. I think many who are doing this for the first time would find that really helpful.
Definitely.
I guess I wanted to close off really with understanding what are your dreams for Enviroo, like in the long run?
So my dream for Enviroo is that we have a complete solution for several plastic types. At the moment, we're focusing on PET plastic, which is for your food and beverage. Ultimately, I want to be able to move into other plastic materials that are relevant long term. I know there's going to be a lot of research required as to what materials will remain in certain manufacturing. Shampoo bottles have changed, milk bottles have changed. There's a lot of change. So I want to understand, impacts of extended producer responsibility. But ultimately, the long-term vision of Enviroo is to be able to be a holistic plastics recycler that tackles both at home and on the go recycling, and that really unites each stakeholder and can prove both environmental positive impact and a real, massive social impact as well. And combining those two would be is a long-term vision, and that will ultimately starting the acorn growing into the oak tree, starting with the first PET facility. As we succeed in that, we see us rolling this out and getting the buy-in from the different stakeholders, which we've seen today. So that's the long-term vision.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you for your time.
I'm so glad we met, and I'm so glad to be a part of this journey.
Yeah, I look forward to having you on that journey.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thanks, Gia.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Cheers.